listen to a lot of songs and write a lot of songs. And unfortunately, that's not helpful at all. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. And afterwards, I'm going to give you a really clear way to turn that advice into like actual helpful advice that will make you a better writer. So if you just look at this, like logically, it doesn't make any sense. Like the fact that all you have to do is just listen to a lot of songs and write a lot of songs, and that's how you're going to become a better songwriter. I mean, like there are lots of people out there listening to a lot of songs and writing a lot of songs, and they're not great songwriters yet. And this is what I see a lot at Lyric Mastery. And I talk to writers like all the time, and most of them listen to a lot of songs and write a lot of songs. They have been doing that for a very long time, but they are not great writers yet. And they definitely haven't published something that they're really, really proud of. So the problem with all of these famous songwriters that are giving this advice, like over and over and over, is that they're running into this idea of the survivorship bias, So what is that? Survivorship bias occurs when we focus on the survivors of a particular process and overlook those that have failed. And that can lead to those false conclusions, since the failures are not considered in the analysis. So what happens is all of these famous songwriters are hearing this advice and give this advice. And we are listening to them because they're these famous songwriters and music artists, right? But the problem is, like, a lot of people are doing this and they are not getting the results that these songwriters have. And so what that means is, like, at the worst version, they're lying. But of course, let's not assume they're lying. Let's assume that these people are really great at something, but they don't know how they actually do it. And this is really, really common. Like, I have been working with writers for almost 10 years, and I know a lot of people that are really good at things who cannot explain how they do what they do. Like, being good at something is completely different than being able to teach something. Like, this is why Tony Robbins, one of the greatest motivational speakers of all times, he has a vocal coach. Like, being able to see a problem and teach it is a different skill set than actually being able to do the thing. And this is why if you go to like masterclass.com and you see all these awesome classes by all of these famous writers, and then you watch the class and you go through it, and what exactly have you learned? Are you actually able to iterate on your writing? Have you leveled up your writing? I mean, they talk for a long time and say a lot of things, but what I have found, like just going through these, because I want to learn writing too, is they talk a lot, but don't actually say much because they're talking about their process. But then they're leaving out parts because, again, they don't understand how they do what they do. For them, it comes intuitively. And so when you ask them, they want to be helpful, of course. They want to give good advice. And so that's when they look back and they say, like, well, you know, I guess what I did was just I've listened to a lot of songs and I wrote a lot of songs. And then, you know, and I believe this can't be it. Like, if we look at all the people doing this, most of them don't turn into great songwriters. And so therefore, that is not the path. So let's look at why it doesn't work. The problem is just, it's too random. Like, imagine or think back when you wanted to learn to play the guitar, right? And you've never played the guitar before. You've never watched a class on playing the guitar. And all you decide to do is, I'm going to pick up a guitar. I'm going to put some strings on it. I'm going to try to turn the little knobs at the top until they sound, I guess, okay. And then all I'm going to do is listen to music. And then, like, randomly put my fingers in places and try to learn how to play the guitar. And, well, that's not going to work. You're going to get frustrated because it's too random. You're just kind of listening to great music, and you can get great music in your head, right? But when you pick up a guitar and you try to put your fingers in the right places and tune the strings at the right way, I think it just doesn't sound the same. And actually, like, this is even better as to what happens when writing. Someone wants to say something? No. Okay. So yeah. So I think like this example with the guitar is even better to understand this. And wait, so, okay. Because like most of us, if we hear great music and when we play a note, like we can tell it's wrong, right? Like immediately, right? You hear that it's wrong. But with writing, what happens is that you cannot hear that what you're writing is wrong. And so you're writing and writing and writing, and you can't tell that what you're doing isn't working and doesn't work. And so you're listening to a lot of songs and you're writing a lot of songs, but it's not actually going to get you there because it's far too random to listen to a lot of songs and write a lot of songs. And yes, Melly, we're going to be talking a lot. We are going to unravel this now. I see your message in the chat, but let's just talk about that, okay? I want to be a little spark the discussion today. So let's talk about this. Like, it sounds like super creepy, right? It's easy to say, but it doesn't work. So we're going to get rid of that. Okay, and just keep in mind, I'm talking about the art of writing lyrics here, okay? I know you all bring different perceptions to songwriting and everything that goes into writing a song. Keep in mind, I'm talking about the art of writing lyrics here, all right? That's what I just said in the beginning, okay? So we are going to get rid of that. And let's replace it with something that will actually be helpful. So let's start with that first one. Listen to a lot of songs. Okay. So what can we do instead of listening to a lot of songs that will actually help us become a better songwriter? So instead of listening to a lot of songs, let's just study. Okay. And instead of just studying, we are going to study masterworks. Now, what is a masterwork? Like, masterworks are those songs that have endured over time. They are operating at the top of their genre. They are the songs that we can come back to like over and over again, and that bring in royalties again and again, because like every generation like keeps listening to them like again and again. And what I recommend is you find a song that you love in the music genre that you're trying to write in, and then you're going to study that song. So we have this advice like that floats out there, like listen to the song, right? And you should obviously listen to it. But there's also some great questions that you can ask yourself about the song. Like, what's the song about? Like on a global level, what's the song about? Who's the song's main character? What's their challenge or their problem? What do they want? What's the character's journey in the song? Because like the biggest mistake that I see songwriters make is the lyrics don't go anywhere. And if we want to write songs that carry that meaningful message, we need to have something change from the beginning to the end of the song, because stories are about change. And of course, there are those songs that are just about a moment in time. But as soon as it comes to wanting to communicate a message, giving your audience a meaningful takeaway, or teaching a lesson, we gotta take the song somewhere. Now, to track those changes, we have the five waypoints, the 5 commandments of storytelling that create the journey for the listener and for the song's main character. And those are the inciting incident, a turning point, a crisis, a climax, and a resolution. But you don't want to just study like the macro view of the song, because that's important. Of course, you want to look at the song as a whole. But then you just want to study one verse, even one line. So start with the first verse and spend your time looking at how the lines are crafted. What is each line about? What about the word choices? How does each line add more depth and make the song progress? So the idea here is like that you take this one song and then study that song and actually learn from it. So don't just randomly listen to a bunch of different songs. Like, take the time to pick a great song and spend time studying and learning how that master songwriter crafted a song that has endured the test of time. Okay. So we're going to get rid of this idea of just listening to a lot of songs. And instead, we're going to replace it with study masterworks. And even Bob Dylan said, the best way to learn the craft of songwriting is to study the masters, listen to their songs, and learn from them. And so next, we got to look at that second part of that bad advice, like to write a lot of songs. Let's talk about this one. Now, if you don't have a habit of writing, this idea of just writing each day, this is not necessarily bad advice, okay? Like writing every day is building up that habit and actually getting yourself writing. This is very important. But pretty quickly, once you build up that habit, we need to look at this idea that you're just writing, and don't just write every day. Because if you keep writing every day, you're going to solidify bad habits. Like, let's look at that earlier example with the guitar. Like, you wouldn't want to train your ear to hear bad music. And if you keep writing every single day, and that writing isn't good writing, you're actually training your ear to bad writing. And so we want to get rid of this idea that for years and years and years, you're just churning out song after song after song, like hoping at some point it will turn into great writing, because this is too random. So we're going to look at a better way to do that. So instead of just like write a lot of songs, we are going to practice our skills. And we are going to look at the skills that go into writing, and we are going to get really, really good at those before we try to create this masterpiece that we are trying to create, right? So what does it mean if we want to practice? Like practice our skill work. Because a lot of times when you're talking about writing, people are like, well, you know, you have to find your voice and you have your own style, right? But what I found is, like, as I studied and dissected great songs, is you can take a song like I'm a Believer by the Monkees and Love Again by Dua Lipa, which could not have like two more different styles. But if you peel back the style, they're doing the same thing. They are the same skills showing up in both types of writing. Again, I'm looking at the art of writing the song lyrics to get the message across. Okay. And same is true when we look at I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor and Flowers by Miley Cyrus. In fact, like I see this over and over and over when I study song lyrics. Okay, we just have to peel back the layer and the foundational structure is the same. So the example that I like to use is, let's just say you want to be a great painter. So if you want to paint a beautiful painting, like what goes into this? Well, you've got to learn how to use the tools, right? You got to know paints and brushes, pencils, charcoal, those like painting and palette knives. Like there are all of these tools, and you can see in your head what you're trying to create. You can see the picture. But if you don't know how to use the actual tools, you're never going to be able to create it. So imagine, like, if a master painter came along and said, hey, for the next 6 months, you're going to work alongside me, and I'm going to show you how to use each of these tools. And then at the end, you'll have the skills you need to go and paint whatever you want. But for the next 6 months, you're going to draw what I want. Now, if you are truly serious about becoming a great painter, I think this is a killer deal. I just give up 6 months, and then I learn all the skills I need, so I can create that thing that I actually want to create. And I think songwriters, like so many times, like we are focused on, I want to write my song, I want to write my album, I want to say what I've got to say. And we just write and write and write, like an idea pops up and we write and write and write. But then it never actually turns into great lyric writing. And so what I try to do with my programs is teach songwriters the skills, okay? And now is the question, of course, what are those skills? So let's talk about that. Well, it all comes back to the art of writing lyrics. And so the first overarching skill that you've got to learn is how to write a great song opening line. Because if you can't write a great opening line that hooks the listener, they are not going to pay attention or might even skip the song. So if you can't write an opening line that gets their attention, intrigues them and speaks to them, creates an emotional connection and gets them to wonder like what happens next, and that does set up a promise as to what to expect in the rest of the song, then we have no business writing an entire song. Because if we can't get the audience to be excited to listen and keep listening, why are we going to write an album that won't work? Or even put the music to the song if no one will listen to it? So the first overarching skill that you need to learn is how to write a great song opening line. And you can practice that. You can try to write song opening lines, just one after the other, nothing else. And I'm so excited for tomorrow when we will actually do this. And I will show you an opening line device and different techniques on how you can write a catchy first line. Okay, but like looking at an entire song and writing the opening line for that, there's a lot of stuff that has to be figured out beforehand. Because as soon as it comes to writing like the entire lyrics of the song, there are many, many more skills involved. Like, what's the song about? What will it revolve around? Where do you take the song? What's the concept? How will it progress in a meaningful way? With what do you start? And where do you start? What will you put into each lyric section? What kind of message do you want the audience to take away from the song? Because even this informs the beginning or starting point of the song. Like, how do you want to create that emotional connection? Where will you put the 5 waypoints of the characters and the audience's journey? Will you include all of them? And which one will get the most focus? What are the objects of desire? Have you made sure you have a value shift by the end? And you say what's necessary without info dumping? Like how to write great action? Like all of these things go into writing a song, and all those things also inform your opening line. Because you have to write every part with intention and clarity. You always got to know where to take the song and what goes where and what to include and what to leave out. And you see, it can easily get confusing. There are so many things like to juggle to know just for writing the opening line, which serves as the strong entry point into your song. And you got to be very clear and intentional to what it has to accomplish and how it relates and refers to the rest of your song. So you've got to focus on the skill work that goes into writing a single song, like before you try to go on to write an entire album. And then even talking about writing one song, like brings up this idea of how do you learn a complex skill, like writing song lyrics, because this is a complex skill. And there are lots of studies on this. There's lots of information out there, but there's this idea of deliberate practice. And deliberate practice is basically 3 different steps. So the first one is you take a complex skill and you break it down into small parts that you can actually focus on. Like that's step 1. Step 2 is to practice that skill. So you don't practice the big whole thing that you're trying to learn. You're trying to practice that one skill that you're focusing on. And then the third part, and this is the part that songwriters get like wrong constantly, is because we need to have a short feedback loop. So what does it mean? That means you try to do something and then somebody who knows what they're talking about looks at what you just tried to do and then gives you feedback, and then you try it again. But here's like how most songwriters do it, okay? Like the first mistake I see, like they just write every day. And that's again, write a lot of songs. And I see stuff on Facebook where people are like, oh, I have written 50 songs. I have written 100 songs. I have written 200 songs. And I'm like, again, that's great. But like, has anybody looked at any of that writing to tell you whether or not it's good. So your feedback loop is now like 200 songs in what, like a decade of writing? And this is too long. Like, think about it. If you are learning the guitar, imagine if you played the wrong note and you didn't know you were playing the wrong note, and you just kept playing and playing the wrong note for decades. And the other mistake I see writers make is write like an entire album before they get any feedback on any of their writing or any of their songs. And it's the same thing where the feedback loop is just too long. And so you've got to shorten that feedback loop. So write a song at most, and then get somebody that knows what they're talking about and knows what they're doing to look at your song, tell you what you did right, what you did wrong, and then you can go and try again. And then they tell you what you did right and then what you did wrong, and then you try again. And this is how you can get better at writing lyrics. You practice skill work, and you practice it in this deliberate practice sort of way. Now, how do you find somebody to give you that kind of feedback? Well, maybe you have a friend that is learning this alongside of you. Maybe you get guys like here on this call, maybe in that group, you can learn this together and keep giving each other feedback. But you've got to shorten your feedback loop, because this is the mistake I see so many songwriters make, and they literally like waste years and years of their life just writing and writing and writing and writing, and they never actually get to where they want to be. And worst of all, they kind of feel like their writing is good, but when you look at it, it's not close to where they could be. Okay. And honestly, this gets really close, because I don't understand this. Why does like everyone assume that a novelist or screenwriter is the only writer who needs an editor by their side? I don't understand that part. Like, why is this in our society like this, or this common perception? Why should songwriters not have an editor who helps them with their craft? It's writing after all as well. And songs are just a different medium, but the art, the craft of storytelling, the art to write meaningful things, that's the same. It's the same foundation. So sometimes I'm really confused why no one has ever talked about that. Like, so many focus on the science, on making the words rhyme, and have endless discussions about song structure or about all those fancy literary devices. But no one looks at this. No one is exploring the art of writing lyrics. And for me, I just want to build this awareness. I want to show there's so much potential to craft these powerful lyrics. All we need to do is learn the art, learn the skills, study masterwork songs, and deliberately practice our skills. So we're going to get rid of that idea of just write a lot of songs, and we're going to replace it with deliberately practicing skills. So if we go all the way back to the beginning and we look at this advice, listen to a lot of songs and write a lot of songs, like hopefully by now you understand that is not going to get you where you want to be. And we are going to replace it with study masterworks and deliberately practicing skills. Now, it's not as creepy, but it will get you where you want to go.